Have you been hearing all about Figma but are feeling overwhelmed by it? Or maybe you haven't even tried it and are looking to learn it step by step? Well, my friends, you are in the right place because today you are going to get to learn how to use Figma completely from scratch from a professional UX UI designer with over 10 years of experience. By the end of this course, you'll know exactly why Figma has become the go-to design tool for so many. But why is this Figma course the one you should follow? Well, let me tell you why. Reason 1, you get to learn from Daniel Scafano, who has been a product designer for a decade and has led design for major VC-backed companies. Reason 2, you don't have to worry about wasting your time with unnecessary fluff. Dan understands time is money, which is why he's only going to teach you what you need to know right now so you can start designing your own projects ASAP. Reason 3, your learning doesn't have to stop here. This crash course is actually part of Dan's complete web and mobile design bootcamp course, which has been taken by over 100,000 people. Talk about credibility. As a bonus, after this crash course is over, I will be presenting to you 2 different paths that you can take to continue your learning journey and ultimately help you get hired as a professional designer. If that's what you're interested in, make sure to stick around until the end. One last thing, if you're liking this video and are finding it helpful, please drop it a like. It really helps us out and shows us that you want to see more great free content. But that's enough chit chat from me. Let me hand it over to Dan so you can start your journey in learning and mastering Figma. Enjoy!
Hey everyone, this is the Figma website. I want everyone to understand what Figma actually is. So Figma is free. There are some paid plans and I'll get into that, but Figma is free. It allows you to create amazing UIs, allows you to collaborate with your team really easily, and allows you to prototype and get feedback. And it's an easy handoff for developers. Let's jump right in so I can show you. So this is their website. Now, some of you may be using the web browser to log in, and you're going to sign up here and log in here. But, if you're really interested in using something like FigJam, which is one of the other Figma products, you can use FigJam here as well. It'll allow you to easily brainstorm. It's a really great tool. But one of the great things about Figma is the ability to just bring your ideas to life. Whether that's just creating, iterating, and repeating that whole process, Figma allows you to create some really beautiful designs. I think one of the other great things is the collaboration aspect. As you can see just in this little illustration over here, you have 2 people working together. You can see comments. It's great for getting feedback. If you're a design system nerd like myself, I know this may not make sense to some of you, but design systems are really powerful. They allow you to create components. They allow you to, use those components everywhere. And there are some different distinctions between how you can use components within Figma, and I'll get into that. But components are really powerful. It really is great to work with developers on how to use these components, what they look like, what their different states are. It's really great. And the last part is developers can easily come in here and understand what exactly makes up one of your designs, whether it's like a UI element that they're clicking on. They want to know maybe position. They want to know like if there's like a border radius. They can get all this CSS from Figma as well. So Figma is a great tool that will allow you to work with your entire team, whether it's strategy, design, and even development. Another great thing about Figma is that they have a bunch of resources. I'm going to get into what is the community, but you can get files and templates, plugins and widgets. It's amazing. It'll really help speed up your workflow and share some of your designs even with the community. It's a really great place. Hey everyone, we're going to talk about pricing and just the plans in general that Figma offers. Now, Figma offers 3 different plans. Most of you are going to be totally fine in the free starter plan. Now, there are some limitations. some of those limitations are that you can only use one project with 3 files. That's a bit limited, but some of you may not mind. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would just try Figma out and then maybe move to professional if you want something that's a bit more expansive. Now, some of the things that you can do in the professional account is that you can use these components I was talking about earlier and use them across a bunch of different files. Now, if you do create components and you like using design systems or design libraries, you won't be able to use them outside of their local files if you're in a starter plan, which is limiting to some. Some won't care as much because they may not be using components a lot. But if you plan to, then the Figma Professional plan is going to be the plan for you. That is one of the biggest differences that I personally noticed from one plan to the other. So I would recommend start off with the free account, go from there. If you do like it, the professional account is way worth it. If you need the projects, if you need those files, if you need to be able to use design libraries across multiple projects and files. So just a heads up, that is the biggest difference. Now, one of the other things is you can come over here into the website where I'm currently at, and you can just see and compare them really easily. So I'm going to post this link as a resource for everyone who's interested. It's super, super helpful if you're looking to distinguish, line item by line item, what the differences are. When you do want to sign up, you're going to be able to come in here and just click sign up. You can use like a Google password or a Google account and do it like that. You can actually just sign up with your email, but you're going to sign up right through here, and it's going to ask you a bunch of questions about which plan you want to be a part of, etc. And you'll be pushed right into the actual website. Hey everyone, I want to talk about where you can get the Figma downloads. So I know many of you may have signed up already, some of you haven't, that's totally fine. So don't worry about that. Now you can sign up on the website and you can use the web browser as your way of using Figma, and that works perfectly fine because the actual desktop experience doesn't vary much. Some people just have a preference. I'm one of those people that use it both on my PC, I use it on my MacBook, and that's how I prefer to use Figma. I like that dedicated space without the noise of a browser, but if you want to use the browser, go right ahead. You don't need to really worry about the Figma download section here. Now you can access this on the website by just clicking on products, going down to downloads, and this is where it'll be. Now you can find the desktop app here for both Mac OS and Windows. You can also find the mobile app for Android and iOS. So the mobile app is really great if you're on the go, you want to take a look at design files, you want to answer some comments, you want to, take a look at a prototype. That's what the mobile app is really good at. If you want the desktop app for that, dedicated experience, this is where you're going to come. So I'll make these links easily available for everyone. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I wanted to go through the Figma UI and more specifically just the structure of the dashboard area over here. Now, where we currently are is where you're going to land when you first open Figma every single time. Now, you'll have the navigation bar up here. You can search, you can see your accounts that you have connected. You can connect more than one account, so it's really easy to switch. You can access the community as well. If you're working on multiple teams or if you shared a file that has comments on it, notifications will show up over here. If you want to access more things about your account, you can do that here. Even has a nice link to get the desktop app. You can add your account here if you have multiple accounts, like I mentioned before. You switch them on this side. So I do that really often. I have multiple accounts and I love switching between them, between my work and my personal. So that is the navigation bar. Then you have the sidebar. Now your sidebar is made up of a bunch of different things. You have your recents, where you're going to be accessing all the files that are available to you based off of what you recently opened. You have your drafts. Now these are where all your files are going to live. Now if you don't have a professional plan, majority of your files are going to live right here, and that's fine. I would just name them properly and find a convention that works for you to create a little bit of structure. Because if you do have a professional plan, you'll have the ability to add a bunch of projects and a bunch of files within those projects. Unfortunately, that's a bit limiting right now to the starter plan. A great thing about Figma, and I'll get back to this file I just opened, is you can have favorite files. So if I go back to my recents up here, you'll see that I've starred a couple of files now, 3 files, and they'll all show up here. So if you're working on a file or there's a file that you constantly refer to, that's a great way to just find it in one spot. All this functionality is also within the desktop app. Now these are the files, so you can click them like I did before and open up a new tab, or you can right click them and you can, see all the different options available to you. Whether you want to share it, you can copy a link, you can remove it from your favorites, you can duplicate it, etc. You can even start a new design file right from your drafts or your recents, or import a file, like some of the resources we have. So that is the easiest way to do that over here. And that is your Figma dashboard. Hey everyone, we're going to talk a bit more about files. Now files can be a little tricky to just understand quickly. I mean, maybe not so tricky. This is where you're going to do all your designing, but using the resources available in the course is basically one of those things that are really going to help you be successful at the end of the course. So I'm going to talk about how to use those files and just how to access them. So you can see here, if you've accessed a link that was given to you by the course, this is what will happen. You'll be pushed right into this link and you'll see, oh, ask to edit. Don't click that. That's just not what you're going to do here. The easiest way to actually get here and get this file is to go and click this little arrow. We're going to duplicate that file. We're going to click the arrow and we're going to duplicate the file to our drafts. And just like that, a new tab is made, a new file is made. And if we go back, we can see that this is the new file. It's our recents. This is still one that is the original. This is my file that I'm sharing with everyone. And now you can use this file as well. So this layer is locked, I believe, but you can go ahead and move it around and start editing this actual file. So that's how you're going to duplicate files. If you've downloaded the resources, or if you have another file that you want to bring in here, you're going to click the import file. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the Figma file like that, bring it right in, and it has been imported. And we can click it, and it's going to open up that new tab. And here you'll be able to edit it as well. So that is how you bring in files. You can duplicate them, import them. If you want to create new design files, all you have to do is just click this new design file right here, this big button. So you click that, it's going to open up a new file and it's going to bring you right inside. And here you can click whether you want to name it something. So I have my new design file, and now you are on the canvas. This is the canvas area. And that is how you basically use design files in Figma. Hey everyone, I want to talk about tools. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to create our new design file. So I'm going to click that button. It's going to pop open that new tab. I'm just going to call this one test for now. Now I'm going to show you a bit about Figma and all the different things you have going on over here. So over here, we just have the tabs. So these give you like a quick overview of what you have open. You could have multiple tabs open. Up here is the toolbar. So let's start from the left. This is going to be your menu. And your menu is going to have a lot of different interesting things in here. You're going to be able to see quick actions. So if you like using quick actions, you can click that and say, I'm going to search for plugins. So I can go and search plugins in the community. Really great way to see what you have available to you. You can also see different types of settings for like your file, the ability to edit, view. I would say the majority of these you may not be touching. You may touch them once and then just leave it. I think one of the biggest things that is really helpful here is going into the help and account and going to keyboard shortcuts, which is going to pop open a shortcut tab right at the bottom based off of your system that you're using. And it'll help you think about, well, how do I access something like, the pen tool, and, how do I make select all for MacBooks? For a Mac OS, it's going to be Command A versus Control A. So, you're going to be able to get all that information right within the app, which is super helpful. So I'm just going to close that right now. So that's the menu. This is where you're going to access your tools. So we have our basic tools up here. We have Move and your Scale tool. We have your Frame tool. Now I'm going to go into these a bit deeper later, but these are where you're going to get your Frame tool. Frames are where you're going to draw essentially your canvas. You're going to draw things on the frame. It's like the canvas or your artboard, whatever you would like to call it, but in Figma, they're called frames. So we have our frame and slicing tool. Frame is probably the most important. Then we have our shapes, and this is where you can come in and make some great shapes if you're making logos, if you're just using shapes for just interest on your web page, or whether it's like a mobile app or something. This is where you'll come to use your shapes, and they have the shortcuts on the right. So you have your rectangle, you have your line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, and you can place your image here as well. This is your pen tool, which is really helpful if you're making custom shapes. I love the pen tool. We have the text tool. This is really helpful if you need to write something. Text tool is going to be your friend. So that's the text tool. And we have the hand tool for moving things around. Really helpful for moving around selections and not clicking into them. And then we have the comment tool. So one great thing Figma does is they have this onboarding tutorial system. So when you sign in for the first time, they're going to run you through everything. You'll also see certain things for new tools and whatnot. So that is really helpful. So I'm just going to close that. So we have our comments. You can just leave a comment when you click on that tool. So I have a comment here. I'm going to just write, hey, great work. And then press enter, and that comment is stored. And you can move comments around. It's really great, and you can keep track of them over here. Then you have things like contextual tools. So let's say I have a rectangle. I'm going to make a copy of that rectangle using Command C. You can use Control C if you're on Windows, and then Command or Control V. And then I have that copy. So you can see that over here in the layers panel. So if I have, two different rectangles, I can see my contextual tools. So over here you have components. This is a little advanced, so I'm not going to really talk about components too much right now. We have masking. Masking essentially allows you to create shapes and hide different aspects of other shapes. So you can use the masking tool there. And we also have Boolean tools as well. So I'm going to actually select both of these. And you have these Boolean operations. So you can create a union, subtract. So if I'm going to do that, I'm just going to subtract, and it's taken a chunk out. So a lot of cool things up there in the contextual tools. Aside from that, you do have the file settings over here, whether you want to see the version history, you want to publish components, you want to rename it, you want to move it to a new project or another project, delete it or favorite the file. You can do that all within here. This is where you can access the project it was in. So ours was in drafts, and I clicked drafts. I'm going to go back. So That's what I clicked over there. And over here on the right side, you have some of your share and view settings. You'll see the different people that are in this file when they're in here as little avatar bubbles. You'll be able to click the share button and get into all the nitty-gritty ways to share, whether that's with, anyone with the link can view. This is how you're going to get your files. You're going to get them as viewable files, like I said. You can also just invite people manually. You can let them edit. And that is how you would just grab the link. You could also play prototypes. So if I were to make a frame, I'm going to press F to make that frame. So if I have a little iPhone 13 mini, I'm going to just put that there and just drag one of my text layers on here. And I'm just going to place that there for now. So this is just my design. I know it's great. And if I press play, it's going to open up that prototyping tab for us. And you'll be able to see your prototype. You can link together prototypes and they'll show up there. So that is essentially how you would play a prototype. If you want to get into the zoom and view settings, you can do that here as well. You can customize what you see, and you can customize basically how you see it. You'll see like all the shortcuts here for zooming in and out and how to access some of these view options. And that is the toolbar. Hey everyone, I want to talk about now the left sidebar. So you'll see that I'm not in my test file anymore. This is what it looked like before. It was kind of a mess. So I think it's probably best that we look at a real file that, has a bit more structure to it so you can understand what the left sidebar looks like. So I'm just going to pop this out. And we are going to talk about this area, the left sidebar. So the left sidebar is where you're going to find layers. There's different types of layers here. You can find frames, there's groups, there's components. Right here, this is a frame. This is what a frame looks like. And this is an auto layout frame. These are different types of shapes. So this is a line shape, which is a horizontal rule that's going right across. You can see it highlighted. You have groups or different types of layers. So if I were to make this a component really quickly, that's what a component would look like, or a master component if I make a copy of it. That's what an instance of a master component would look like. So I'm just going to backpedal over here so we don't get too deep in the weeds there. But essentially, there's so many different types of layers. You can have shapes, images, GIFs. I mean, they'll all show up differently here just based off of their icon. And this is where you're going to find them. And you'll see some of them are even nested. So this is the header area. And within the header area, I have like the navigation for this design. And within the navigation, I have like the main navigation, which are these different options over here. And if I click this little arrow, I can see all those different options. And essentially, you can nest different types, and that's how Figma works. They allow you to nest frames within frames or shapes within groups. It makes it really easy for you to understand and where things are and kind of take the approach like a developer as to how to structure some of your content, like within containers and so on. So that's how nesting works. And the easiest way to do that is I'm just going to take a rectangle. So I'm just going to click the rectangle tool. I'm going to take a rectangle, and over here we see my special rectangle. I can take that and put that within my header area. So you can just drag them into wherever you would like, and they will show up accordingly. So I'm just going to quickly delete that by pressing my delete key, or you can press your backspace key. And that is how you get rid of a layer. So you can easily right click on a layer and see all the different options you have for it. You can even do that over here if you'd like. You can right click on a certain layer and get those same options by doing that here. You can drag them, reorder them. You can even delete them by pressing backspace or delete the delete key while you're selecting them. So that's essentially it for how to like kind of use them within this sidebar. But you can also double click and I can name this to like cool logo instead. So now that one's renamed. So really, really great here. That's just like easy way to rename files. I love naming all the different aspects of like my file, just so it's nice and clear for me to come back to it, even share it with others so they understand like what they're looking at. When I see things that are like frame 1204, it gets really messy. Like that's what it comes up as. And if you just make new copies, like it's just, they mean nothing. They just mean frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and it's really hard to follow that. So I'm just going to delete that really quickly. Okay, so that is how you rename layers, nest layers. You can also lock them, which I find really helpful. Sometimes you want to work on something and you don't want like to, in this instance, let's say we don't want to touch the navigation. So I'll right click over here. You can also see the little lock. You can hide it, but you can even lock it. So once you lock it, you can't really, oops, I'm going to lock the header. Yeah, you can't move the header anymore. So that's really great if you're working with like layers that are over top one another. You can easily hide it too if you just don't want to see it at the moment, or lock it. So different options there. You can also do that by right clicking and going to the bottom. These are the shortcuts. Shift Command L on Mac OS and Shift Command H on Mac OS. And that is how you lock and unlock layers. There's also another aspect of this sidebar. So right now I showed you layers. Now there's assets. You can come in here and, create components. So an example is if I take this logo, or this button's actually probably a way better example. So if I take this button and I'm just going to drag a copy by holding Option on my Mac. But if I just take this button and turn it into a component, it shows up in my local components, and then I can drag them from there. And now I have a responsive button that I can use anywhere. And Figma will just throw that little tutorial up there, really helpful for us. But that is how you would use your assets panel. And you can use components from other libraries, other projects. Other people can just share libraries with you that they can control, but maybe you'd want the components in there to reuse. But this is a great way to use reusable components. Remember, if you're on a starter plan, you won't be able to use components that extensively. You will only be able to make components within your file like I just did and use them. So I can make this a component. Oops, I'm going to grab the logo here that we made, or that I made. We're going to make this later, but I'm going to grab this logo over here and I'm going to turn it into a component. And now that logo is there. So you can use your local components, but you won't be able to access components beyond that, unfortunately. And that is the assets panel. The last thing I did want to talk about though is the pages. So you'll go back to your layers and you can see over here, you're on the landing page, or I'm on the landing page. You can see all the different types of pages here by just clicking this little drop down, and I can add a new page. And it's going to create a new canvas for me over here. But if I go back here, I have that canvas. If I go back here, I have my cover canvas. So you can move through all these different pages as you see fit, and you can create new pages. Remember, there is a limitation to the starter plan. I believe it's only 3 pages within a file, which isn't too bad, to be honest. Many people won't really exceed that, and some of these files already have a bunch of pages, and you'll be fine using those files because I've given them to you, but you won't be able to create new pages from that. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, and you can just delete pages. You can copy a link to a specific page. You can rename them in the same way you rename layers. You can do that all over here, and you can duplicate pages as well, like I just did. And that is the left sidebar. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Let's jump right in because we're going to talk about the right sidebar. Now, the right sidebar is really where you're going to do a lot of your work. So let's jump right in. So I'm just going to click on this frame over here. I'm going to close this. So your frame is going to have, well, our frame over here that I'm, the landing page frame that's housing all of this content is going to have a bunch of different things on the side here. You'll notice that this is your like alignment and distribution up here. So an example is I can take, say, these three things. I'm just moving really quickly here just for the sake of the demonstration, but I can take these three things and select them all, and then you can tidy them up by just, moving them to the top or making them all come to the middle. You can space them out separately by clicking this over here. So distribute like horizontally the same way. And yeah, you can align them easily. So that's where you're going to get your alignment and distribution. You can also see your frame size or just the size and orientation of your layer. So I have the X, the Y, that's where it's positioned. I also have the width of the frame. I have the height of the frame. I have the angle. You can turn things if you want. So I just threw a 90 over here. I'm just gonna go back, Command Z or Control Z, depending on what system you're on. You can even set a border radius up here. So you can see that the border radius has smoothed that corner. And that is basically all for your frame size, your orientation. You have your position on the canvas, the X and Y values up here. You have your dimensions, which is the width and the height. Another interesting thing that I want to talk about is constraints. So we have, sometimes you'll have like your, just your resizing options over here. So this one's set to fill, and you can hug the content. You see how that kind of like messes up the frame a bit. We'll get into this in much more detail, but this is where it's located. You can fix the height of this. So it's a set height. You can clip your content. So if I were to go like this, you can see that that content's not showing anymore because it's set to clip. So you can hide content beyond the frame. That's where all that is going to be. And another interesting thing is your constraints. Well, actually, let's go back here. So if I select my hero frame, constraints are going to show up here because constraints can only show up within a regular frame. I'll get into that later. But this is what constraints look like. So left and right and top and bottom are for your vertical and your horizontal constraints. So if I move the landing page like this, it's going to shrink with it. If I move it like this, it's going to shrink with that as well. So those are your constraints. If you have an auto layout frame, these are where your auto layout details are going to be. So we'll get into that later as well. You have the ability to create layout grids if you're into creating grids. So you can create grids if you want. You have your layer properties, whether it's set to like pass through or darken, kind of like Photoshop a bit. And then the ability to set your fill. So if I press just that plus button, I can create new fills in here. I can also select this fill. It's turned off by default, but I can select it and, color it any which way I want. Now I can remove it. You have stroke. You can set a stroke. You see a stroke just showed up on the outside, which is like a border. So you have all your selection colors, you have effects, and in effects you can select like drop shadow, inner shadow. This is basically your bread and butter. You can even export your screen from here as well. As like PNG, you can do it as PDF, SVG, and JPEG. So lots of options for you there. You'll notice that text has its own as well. So text has its own properties, and you can really dig deep into those properties. The other part of this tab, so you have design, now you have prototype. And prototype's really great, and this is how you would, create flows together. If I have two screens and I link them together in some way, like if I click on that screen, it goes to the next, I've created a prototype. And then I can access it by clicking plus. I can also see a bunch of different things. I can choose the interaction. So whether it's on click or whether it's on hover or while I'm pressing. And once I've chosen the interaction, I can, choose the destination. where is it going to? So just one frame to the next. And then like you can choose the animation. You can go move in. You can choose smart animate, and it'll give you some like cool bouncy effects that you can use. So lots of cool things that you can play with over here. Another thing is you can define a lot of things like devices that you may see, whether it's like 11, 13 Pro, and you can customize that all here as well. So that's what you'll do, your prototyping stuff. Inspect is really great for developers to come in. So if I wanted to just jump right here and go to my button, whoops, zooming in. So if I'm going to go look at my button over here, I can easily see all the properties for that button. I can see its height, I can see its border radius, I can see the padding involved in that button. I can see all the actual CSS code spit out over here. This is where developers will really find it easy to find the elements that you've created and turn that design into code. And that is the right sidebar. Hey everyone, I want to jump right into frames. So frames are very important for creating UI in Figma. So this is where the frame tool is. You could easily create a frame by pressing F. So if I just press F, I've already have the tool selected. Over here, I want to just point this out really quickly because when you do create a frame, you're going to see the ability to create a frame based off of a phone size or a tablet size. They even have desktop sizes. So you can create the frame based off of that. You can also just draw it on the board, on the canvas area. So I can just draw a large frame like that, and it's automatically going to say frame 1. I'm going to just go back really quickly. But if I select, like, say, the phone, it's going to automatically create that frame and also create the name for the frame. It will name the frame based off of the type of device. And you can also, select that frame name and rename it any which way you like. So frames are really great for creating content or putting your content inside. So how do you use frames? So if I have my frame selected, I can see all the properties associated with this frame. I can see, its fill. I can, add a different fill if I want to. I can see like its positioning. I can see its size. Basically, this is the majority of the stuff that you're going to basically see with a frame. Now, to create a frame, you can do a couple different things. So say if I have a couple of different items. So I'm going to create some squares. So I'm going to take the rectangle tool, or I'm going to just press R. And I'm going to hold down Shift while I'm dragging to make a square. And I'm going to make a copy by pressing Option. So I have 2 squares here. Let's make them blue squares. So we have 2 blue squares here. Now you can take 2 items and actually select them and group them as a frame. The easiest way to do that is either click one and hold Shift and click the other, and you can do this until you decide not to do it and select a bunch, or you can just drag over and you would select Command, Option, and G. That is for Mac OS. You can also do the same with Control Alt G on Windows. So that's how you group a frame. And that's the easiest way for that. Now, if I wanted to take this frame away, I'm just going to press Shift Command G, which is actually the same or similar command to which is on Windows, which is Shift Control G. So I've selected that. Now the frame has disappeared. So I like to, put frames within frames just as containers to hold my content. And you're going to see how I do that later. Okay, so you may be wondering, you have frames, which are really important. Then you have groups, and they may seem really similar. So if I take 2 items here, I'm going to hold down Shift and do it. I'm just going to press Control G on Windows. So I'm just going to create a group. You can also select whether you want that to be a frame up here. You can toggle between the two. Now there's a couple different use cases for groups versus frames. Frames are really great for, a lot of things. I personally like to use groups for shapes, whether that's like a logo, because when you do select a group and you scale it, all the content basically retains that like dimension of the group. So it's going to shrink within every single way. It's going to scale with it. And that's really helpful for things like logos or little elements that you have on the screen. So that's really helpful for that. Now, if I were to do that with a frame, you're going to notice that this is different. See, the frame acts like a box, and you can have the same desired effect that a group has with a frame, but it's going to basically be a little bit harder. You're going to have to select the items within and adjust their constraints accordingly. So over here, I have the box, and I'm going to have to set it to maybe left and right and top and bottom. That means that when the frame moves left and right, it's going to move with it. So let's look at the difference between this one versus this one. So I'm going to make this one red, so it's just easier to know which one has the constraint set. So this one has the constraint set, the blue one, and I'm just going to move it around. You see how that kind of takes on the same type of movement as the larger frame, whereas the red one is just kind of sticking there because right now it's set to left and top. So if I were to move the left side or the top, it's going to stick. So groups are really great for basically when you want to retain like the size of the larger group that those items are a part of. So I like using them for shapes and things like logos and those types of vectors. Now, if I want to ungroup, that's really easy. You just a Shift Command G, basically the same thing as ungrouping a frame. And for Windows, that is Shift Control G. So Command G or Control G, Shift Command G, Shift Control G. And that is how you create and remove groups. Hey everyone, I want to talk about both basic shapes and Boolean operations because these are some pretty cool things that you can do in Figma. So let's jump right in. So up here in our toolbar, we're going to have our shapes, and we can basically see all our shapes. We'll see our rectangle, our line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, and their associated shortcuts on the left-hand side. So an example is, for rectangle, if I just press R, I have it selected and I can draw a rectangle. And a rectangle basically will be able to create both rectangles and squares. Now, if I select L, I have the line tool and I can make horizontal lines like that, or I can make some vertical lines. Let me just select L again. I'm holding Shift because if I hold Shift, I can create squares that are actual squares instead of like rectangles. If I hold Shift here, I can basically create lines that are very straight and not on an angle. So if I want a vertical rule like that or a vertical rule like that, I'll hold Shift to do that. So I'm just going to select those and turn them into white rules because I'm using the dark mode in Figma. And we have arrows, so that's Shift L. So you can just draw an arrow like this. Turn that into a white arrow, and you can set the settings here, whether that's like a triangular arrow. You can set like the back, whether it's like a little circle. You can set the stroke. So you can create arrows also within Figma, which is really helpful. You can also create ellipses and circles. So I'm going to press O, and O is going to allow me to do that so that you can create ovals. So you can both create ovals, and if you hold Shift, you'll be able to create circles. And these can be used as they are or manipulated to create custom shapes with curved lines. So you can create like pie charts like that. You know, some pretty cool stuff. I'm just going to go back. You'll see this little dot pop up, this arc. And then you can create like your pie chart as you see fit. So really cool. Oh, I created like a little Pac-Man there, but Really cool feature that Figma has released here. And we have the polygon. Polygon does not have a shortcut, so we're just going to select that. Now, the polygon tool allows you to draw an enclosed shape that is made up of any number of straight lines. So I'm just going to draw, and the default one right now is the triangle, but I can adjust the radius. I can also adjust the count to make like hexagons and so on, and octagons and yeah. So I mean, you can really create some pretty cool shapes just with the polygon tool. And then we have the star tool, which is really cool as well, and it kind of functions very much like the polygon tool. So if I take this, I can, you know, make it a little more chunkier. I can make the radius a little bit more softer, and then I can increase the count or decrease the count. So lots of cool different shapes that can come out of both the polygon and the star tool. Now, if you're really into, you know, creating unique or complex shapes, you can build your own vector networks using Figma's pen tool. And that's over here, right beside the shapes drop down. So if I select that, or, you know, if I select P, I can create these little lines and connect them to create some cool things. I can give that a fill. I can also go back and adjust like the curves if I want to. So if you're really into doing stuff like that, the pen tool is your friend. And let's talk about Boolean operations. So we have the union tool. So I'm going to actually start fresh here, just lower. I'm going to press O and get the ellipse, holding down Shift. And I'm going to make another one. So now I have both of these layers. So as you can tell, this one's over this one. And if I want to make like a moon, I can select both. And here I have my Boolean operations. I can merge them together. So that's your union. So I have these two circles. Actually, let me just like grab a square as well. Like we can make some pretty unique things. So I have my square here, or my rectangle, and I'm going to just pick a new color for it. Oops. So there's my new color. And I'm going to select both and go to Boolean operations. So the union selection. So what this does is it combines the shapes into like a group. So it doesn't matter what's overlapping what, it will essentially just become like a group like this. You're going to basically take the color from the overlapping shape in this instance. Now I'm going to undo that, and let's look at the next one. We have subtract. Now subtract is basically the opposite of union. It removes the area of a shape or set of shapes from the shape on the bottom. Only the bottom layer is solid and the rest are subtracted from it. So let's see. So we have like a half circle here. Now the next one is the intersect selection. Now this one's actually really interesting because the intersect creates a group where the shape consists only of the overlapping parts of the layers. So do you see how only this is going to show up when I select that intersect selection? And the last one is exclude. That's right here. And exclude is essentially the opposite of intersect. Exclude only shows the areas of its sublayers that do not overlap. And that is how you use shapes and Boolean operations. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to talk about images within Figma. So we are going to use a ton of images. I mean, it's just the way it is, whether it's for like product images, whether it's just for like landing page images. I mean, there's so many reasons why we are going to use images, and I'm not going to get into that because I think you all know. Now, the ways we can add images to our file, it varies. I personally like using plugins, and I'll explain what plugins are after, but the ways to add images, the two main ways that I personally like to do it is through copy and pasting. And then there's drag and drop. Then there's the third way, which is essentially importing the image through the file browser. So I'm going to show you the easiest way to do it. An example is, say you're in another file. So I'm in this file and I see this image that I really like. I can just copy it by pressing Command C or Control C, and then going back to my other tab and then pasting it with Command V or Control V. And that image is going to show up here. Now you can also access that file on your desktop and you can drag it right into the canvas, and that's going to be totally fine as well. You can do this with everything, frames, you can do it with like groups, anything from one file to the other. You can basically do that. So as you can tell, I just pasted the whole frame in here. So I'm just going to delete these. I'm actually going to use the other way to get one of the pictures I want in here. So if I use the rectangle tool and go down to place image, you'll see the shortcut and you'll see that you can just click this button and it's going to prompt you to select the image that you want. So I'm just going to go into my Figma images and then I'm going to my large image.png and I'm going to place all. You can just click on the canvas as well and it's going to place that. So that's how you get a picture into your file through importing it. Now you can edit your picture in so many different ways. Let's take a look over here to our design tab on the right sidebar. Now you can scale it. So if I want to adjust it, you'll notice that the image is actually like, it's fine. It's just kind of filling the container. This is kind of acting like a frame in a way. It's pretty interesting. And that's why I like using pictures like this in Figma. So you can, just size it like that. You can also hold Shift and size it, and it's all going to size as well. So if you want to retain that original ratio of the image that you had. You can also just adjust things like the radius. You can adjust like if it's rotated here. You can even do that here by just like spinning it. You see this little angled cursor I have now. Now I can just take it for a spin. So that's really easy. And the other things that I really like about images is like the settings right here within the fill. So you can choose, right now it's set to fill, and that's why it's moving like this. But if I set that to fit, it's gonna fit basically whether it's the fitting it horizontally or vertically. See, it's fitting the top and the bottom. But if I shrink it or make it more skinnier, it's going to keep the original ratio of the image and it's going to, just fit the width. And then you have crop, so you can crop it any which way you want. The problem with crop though is like when you go to move it in different ways, now it's, it's not going to keep the same aspect ratio for the actual image, and then you're going to skew it. So I'm just going to go back. So we have crop and we also have tile. So if your image doesn't, span, I don't really use tile at all. Probably could be useful for patterns. I personally use fill a lot and sometimes crop depending on the image, especially with like landing pages. So that's how you can adjust some of the, different types of cropping and positioning. You can also set different things like, the exposure, if you really want to get into some like editing, the contrast, saturation. I know I'm making this look really bad, but I'm just showing you all the different things you can do with a image. Shadows, that's horrible. So I'm just gonna reverse all of that. There we go. You can also set the blend mode over here. You have multiply, darken. So if you want to do a little bit of like, Photoshop kind of esque stuff, you can do that as well with some of the layers. The other great thing that I really love about Figma is that you can actually come here into the fill and adjust and add. Like if I want to add, say, a gradient, I can do that. I can just add a new layer, go up here, set it to like solid, set it to 100%. And then you can start playing around with like how that kind of looks. Like, whoops, I'm gonna go back. And yeah, you can make like your own gradient if you want. So here I can just make like a white gradient that slowly goes into white up here. So that's another thing you can do with some of these Figma fills over here, which is really, really interesting. And that is how you use images in Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. We are going to talk about how to get started with text. Now, text is really easy to use. First thing I'm just going to do to make it easier for everyone to see is I'm going to press F and create a frame. I'm just going to use one of the frames over here. So we have our frame. Now we have our text tool. And now you can just press T to get that tool and you'll be already equipped with it. So if I zoom in here, I'm going to go right in. So what I'm using, you'll notice how I can zoom in pretty easy because I'm using the Command plus over here, the shortcut. You know, you use what is best for you. That's how I like to just quickly zoom in and out. I love using the shortcuts. And the easiest way to create a text layer is just by pressing down. So I've already, there is the layer. It's showing up on my left side. And if I say, hello, welcome, Melanie. Maybe this is like the intro text to an app. So I've created the text layer. One thing we're going to do is we're going to jump right into here. This is what is available for you. Now, these are the properties for a text layer. So we've learned how to create a text layer. Now we can resize text layers, but the problem is, it's a little hard to resize text layers. So they don't necessarily shrink, but the content will go to the next line. If you drag it below, that may get things messed up. And the easiest way to reset once you've done something like this is to either press one of these. So you can set auto width, which would mean that it's just going to go based off of the width of the content, or you can set an auto height, but it's going to basically cut it at a fixed width. So now I've created this width, it can still build below, like you're noticing right now, but it's not like totally uncontrolled when it comes to like how we were initially resizing it. So that's how you resize. So I'm just going to keep it like this for now, right here, where it's just like totally automatic. And let's take a look at some of the text properties. So I have my font. I have the font weight. So I'm going to use like a bold on this one. Oh, maybe a little too bold. I'm going to use semi-bold. And we have our font size. So I'm going to set that up to like 48. Whoa, too huge. Let's get down to 24. Okay. We have the spacing between letters. So if I set that to like 4%, you see how the letters basically are more spread apart. So I'm going to undo that because I think they're fine right now. We can set also the line height. I like to go based off of percentages. So I like to go to say like 115% for headings, maybe 125 to 150% for body copy. I'm going to make a copy below this just so you all can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to actually, use some filler text. So I'm going to use a plugin really quickly so I can grab some of that text. And I'm going to give it like 4 sentences. So you can see now it's been filled with 4 sentences. It's really long, so I'm going to have to shrink that text. Oops. Let's do that again. Sizing to 14. And I'm going to zoom out so I can grab it and bring it in. So there's my text. Now I'm going to bring it to 150%. So the spacing between the lines is better. And set it to regular. Now we also have paragraph spacing. I've already talked about some of the resizing options here. You can make them center aligned. This is just alignment, right aligned, left aligned. You can have an example as if I've set the height fixed. You can adjust where the text aligns there. Another interesting thing is you can go even into more details by pressing that more icon. And you can set the resizing in here. Oops. You can also, make it justified for an alignment. You can have underlines, strike throughs. You can have paragraph spacing and indents and list styles. Yes, Figma now supports list styles, which is great. You can also specify the case style. So really great for like things like subheadings. So that is what is available to you when it comes to the properties for text. Now I have 2 text layers here, pretty cool. And that didn't take us long. And you'll be just zipping through all of this really quickly once you get your handle on text. Because text is one of the big types of UI elements that we're going to use a lot of. Now, I'm just going to quickly demonstrate list items. So if you do have a list item, I'm just going to go to the very front of my list item and then just dash and a space, and it's automatically going to create a list item for me. So you can create a bunch of them. I'm just copy and pasting them. And you can set what type of list item they are, whether they're a numbered list or a bulleted list. So Figma also allows you to adjust the fill of text as well. So you can do that all over here in this little fill panel. And that is how you use text in Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be talking about constraints. Now, constraints are really important if you're using regular frames, and I'll get into that right now. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to press F to get my frame, and I'm just going to pick any frame. I'm just going to pick this one over here. So now that we have our frame in place, what we're going to do is we're going to place some items in there. Now I'm just going to press R to get a rectangle. I'm going to place one rectangle here, and I'm going to place another rectangle below it. Now I have 2 rectangles. So constraints tell Figma how layers should respond when you resize the frames. So let's take a look here. If I'm going to resize my frame, you notice that the layer beneath doesn't actually move. Now, this really helps you control how designs look across different screen sizes and devices. So there's 2 types of constraints. You have horizontal constraints and vertical constraints. Constraints are located over here on the right sidebar. So these are horizontal and these are vertical constraints. You'll notice that it says left and this one says top. That means that when I move the left side, they're going to move with it. And if I move the top side, they're going to move with it as well. Now I want to set it to left and right, and I'll leave that one at top. Now let's see what happens to this rectangle when I resize the frame. You'll notice that now it shrinks and grows. So that's pretty awesome. You can even do it in this way as well. So I'm going to leave that one at left, and I'm going to do top and bottom for the vertical constraints. You'll notice that now it shrinks up and down. You can even do things such as, let's move this one just a little bit lower. For vertical constraints, you can do center. So that means it's just going to stay kind of in place. Watch. So it centers itself. You can do this even for horizontal constraints as well. You can do scale. This is really great if you want something to grow. So notice how that rectangle is going to grow in height and in width as you grow the frame. Pretty cool, right? You can apply constraints to any layer within a frame. It's not possible to apply constraints to layers outside of a frame. So if we now have this layer, I'm going to just create a copy. So I'm going to do Command or Control C and go click outside the frame, and I'm going to press Command V, and Control V would be for Windows, and I'll just drag that right outside the frame. So you notice how it doesn't have the constraints on the side like it did within the regular frame. That's because it's not within a frame. You can only apply constraints within a frame or layers within an auto layout frame. So layers within an auto layout frame and layers outside of a regular frame won't have constraints. only regular frames will have constraints. Sometimes though, you do want to resize the frame with resizing the items within. And the way to do that is to ignore the constraints. And the shortcut to hold is Command for Mac and Control for Windows. So let's take a look. So if I'm going to resize this again, this is set to scale. I'm just going to leave it. So you'll notice that, okay, now I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to hold Command, and I can do it at any point. See, I'm holding Command now, and it'll be Control for Windows users. Now the items within are not moving. Let me just move this one out of the frame there. But as soon as I start to let go of that shortcut, things start to scale again. And that is how you use constraints within Figma. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to get into how to use auto layout. So auto layout is a feature that is essentially part of regular frame. So let's jump right in. I'm going to press F to get my frames list, and then I'm going to just select the first one just for the sake of our demonstration. So I'm going to rename this, and to rename it quickly, you can press Command R or Control R. And I am just going to call this my auto layout frame. And I'm just going to shrink it just a bit. And I'm going to create another frame below it. And I'm just going to call this my regular frame so everyone can see the difference. Now, auto layout frames are really great if you want to have like responsiveness a part of it. If you want to essentially make sure that like you can build some nice lists. It's really great for even, creating like buttons that are responsive. So I'm just going to get into a quick demonstration. So I'm going to create a rectangle or a square, doesn't matter. And I'm going to place it inside both of these frames. Now, when we look at the regular frame, everything is as we learned before about frames. But now let's turn this into an auto layout frame over here. So I'm going to click that frame. And if you go over to the properties panels over on the right sidebar in the design panel, you'll notice auto layout. If you click that little plus button, now it is in an auto layout frame. I'll get into what all this means in a quick second, but this allows you to adjust padding and between items and the padding between that's horizontal and vertical. So if I were to say add another item, like let me add another rectangle, you can just copy and paste it. You notice how the whole frame grows, and if I add more, the frame keeps on growing. And you can even adjust how that frame works, the direction, if you want it to go vertical or horizontal, and there are many more details there. You can even nest auto layout frames within frames. So I'm just going to move this one down, and like here, if you press Command C and Command V or Control C, Control V, it doesn't adjust the frame. So auto layout frames are really great for responsiveness. Let's jump right in. So we have another frame that I want to create. So I'm going to just create 2 frames of 2. So 1 and 2, and then another frame. So I'm going to select these ones. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to right click. And if we go down, we can see that we can turn it into an auto layout. So we can add auto layout. That is another frame. So, and you can see it here, it is applied as well. And I'm going to do the same over here. Right click, and it's Shift A as the shortcut, as you notice over here. This allows me to nest frames within frames. And this is really powerful for layouts. We'll be using this in certain demonstrations as well. But if I now say, change the direction, we're not going to have 4 vertically. We're going to have those 2 frames stack on to one another. And you can see how they're nested below. So we have our 2 rectangles up top and 2 rectangles at the bottom. And you can make some pretty cool grids. And you can even nest another frame within this frame if you'd wanted to. And the easiest way to add new items, you can copy and paste. You can also duplicate, which is Command D or Control D, which will duplicate what your last action. So I'm just going to go back with the Command Z. And you could also reorder the object. So I'm just going to change the color here really quickly. If I use my arrow keys, I can order the object within a frame and even the frame within the other frame. So you can reorder things really quickly just using your arrow keys. Or you can click and drag. Oops, just be careful not to drag it outside the frame. And if I really wanted to just, if I wanted to hide them or delete them, I can do that as well. So I can hide them like that. Or I can just delete it and it's gone. And that is how you use auto layout frames in the most basic sense. Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to get a little bit more into the details of using auto layout within Figma. So auto layout is, like I said, a great tool for creating some responsive designs. But there's a lot of different things that we need to learn about in order to use it effectively. So I'm going to create another frame. So here's my nice frame here, and we're just going to call this our auto layout frame. Perfect. Now I'm going to take another rectangle and just place it inside my frame. Now I'm going to go to auto layout over here on the right sidebar. And now I've created an auto layout frame. I'm going to just duplicate another rectangle within this frame. So that way we have 2 rectangles to work with. Actually, let's just do 3 as well. So I pressed Command D. You can even use Control D. So let's jump right in. So auto layout frames are really good. I mean, you can create buttons that grow or shrink as you edit the text label. You can build lists that adapt as items are added, removed, or hidden. You can combine auto layout frames to build complete interfaces. So think like cards. You have like a card portion with like the button that's in there. You have text in another frame. Mind you, the button is probably its own auto layout frame. And then you have the image that's a frame as well. So you can build these complete interfaces just with nesting all these auto layout frames. Now let's talk about the different properties within an auto layout frame. So selecting my frame, I'm just going to go to the right here. You can select the direction. This is the direction. You can do horizontal or vertical, and direction describes the way the auto layout frame will actually flow. So I'm just choosing vertical for now. You can choose the spacing between items, which is over here. So this is 10 pixels. I can choose, say, 24. That's perfect. Now adjusting the spacing between using canvas controls or spacing fields in the right sidebar. Now you can do it this way, manually like that, or you can just go over there. Now padding is another very important part. The padding is going to be your horizontal padding, which you see over here, and your vertical padding. And you can adjust that by either dragging it. I'm just going to select 24. You can even do that manually by using the canvas. Now, the padding is essentially the empty white space between the boundary of an auto layout frame and the frame's child objects. So think of frames as like a parent, and these are little children within them. So like I mentioned, you can set padding uniformly, which is like selecting 24 and 24 here, which will, oops, not that much, that's too big. And you can also go into the nitty-gritty details and just select bottom padding to be 12 and left padding to be 8 or something like that. It really depends on your use case here. Now, the other thing that I haven't mentioned is alignment. Now, you need to choose how to align child objects within an auto layout frame. Both the direction of the auto layout frame and the distribution will determine what alignment options you have available. So, with that being said, say I had a couple of different objects like this. And I'm going to change the direction like that. you can see this is where you can choose the alignment. If I want them to be centered, aligned to the bottom, to the middle. This is the middle bottom, bottom right. You can choose all these different types of directions. If I wanted to, say, make one wider, then you'll start seeing the differences here. So that is how alignment works. Distribution is another key part. And that's hidden in this little menu, the advanced layout settings. So let's get into it. Once you set the alignment rules for your child objects in a frame, choose how those objects will then be distributed within that frame. So right now they're packed, and that means that they're packed based off of the spacing between the items. If I were to select space between, now they're going to just spread out. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm just gonna make this a little smaller. Now if I extend this like that, you'll notice that the padding is just automatically spacing itself out. Now, that is because it's set to space between. That's how distribution essentially works. You notice that the frame now doesn't go back, and that's because it is not set to hug contents. Let's talk a bit now about resizing. This is resizing up here. Now, one of the most powerful functions of auto layout is its ability to control the dimensions of the objects in an auto layout frame. So there's different types of ways you can resize. You can make it fixed, hug, and fill. So let's take a look over here. This is set to fixed. That means it has a fixed width of 218 pixels. I'm going to fill the container. That means it's going to fill all the way across, and this is amazing if you want to create frames that are responsive. Look at the top layer in comparison to the two bottom layers. Those rectangles are set to fixed. But say I want my frame just to hug the width of the content within. Now it's hugging the maximum width. These are still set to fixed. Now this one is still set to fill. You can have one, say, set to fixed like this, and then these ones set to fill as well. So that is how resizing works. It's really powerful. Now you can still apply constraints to the auto layout frame itself if it's nested within a regular frame. The constraints section and resizing options will appear, allowing you to really set those options if you need to. So let's take a look here. So you'll notice if I select this, my constraints don't show up because it's in an auto layout frame. Again, my constraints are not here, but I'm going to create a new frame. If I take this and throw it inside this frame by just dragging it over, and I'm going to set a stroke so we can see where it is. I'm going to center it. Now my constraints are showing up here. You can set this to anything you'd like. So the problem is left and right isn't showing up here. That's because it's set to hugging content. So if I say set it to fixed width and leave the hugging up here, that's fine for now. Now is available. And I'm actually going to select all of these items, and you can do that quickly by pressing Shift and holding them, or Control A or Command A. And I'm going to set them all to fill container. And now we're going to see how responsive this gets. So you can still build responsive interfaces even with regular frames combined with auto layout frames. This is a really great way to show how you can build some really great interfaces. And that's how you use auto layout frames. Hey everyone, I wanted to teach you all what the Figma community is. Now, the great part about the design community is we love to share files, we love to share what we're doing, and making those resources easily available to one another is a big part of the Figma community. Now, how do you find files? Well, that's really easy. So you can go into this little section right when you log in, and I'm going to go to the community. And here you'll be able to find so many different things. You can just explore based off what is, the most recent, based off of what the award winners are. I mean, this is currently what I'm looking at, trending files. There are so many different things based off of different types of categories. Even Figma produces its own types of files for you to use. This is where you're going to find plugins, files, and everything in between. Let's jump right in. So the reason why you would come here is because you would like to maybe reuse something. Now, the easiest way to do that is just to basically search. Or you can go ahead and take a look at what's been trending. Let's take a look. So say I wanted to grab one of these, one of these files. All I would do is I would click on the file. So this was an interesting one. This is an auto layout one. And then you'd be brought to its listing page or file page. Here you can take a look and move around with the file to see if it's something you'd like. Which is a great feature because sometimes you don't want to download things that you don't want. You're not necessarily downloading them, but you'll be duplicating the file. You can heart the file up here. You can even see what discussion is happening below. You can share it. You can read more about it. Sometimes certain files that you're duplicating or certain plugins that are here will have a lot of information about where else you can read up about it if it's, something that's really complex, or if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the person who created it. Now, to get this file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit duplicate. And what it's going to do is it's going to open that file for me. And what it's done is actually made a duplicate in my drafts. So if I go back to the home icon and go back and I look at my drafts, I can now see that right there. I'm in there right now. You can see my little avatar. And now I have full control over this entire file. And that is how you access free resources through the Figma community. Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to be talking about plugins. So I have this nice little card here that I designed using some auto layout. You can see that we have some nested containers in here. Now, the only thing that's missing, actually there's a couple of things missing here. I don't have a nice image and I don't have body copy here and title copy. So I really don't know what to say. This is just going to be a placeholder, but ultimately I need some stuff to fill in my card. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with plugins? Well, the good thing is Figma offers plugins, and those plugins are created by the community. Ultimately, they're going to help you increase your workflow. So they're not going to make you think about the unimportant things like which image needs to go here and what type of copy do I need to think about here. You can think about all that important stuff afterwards, and you can just worry about designing. So plugins are essentially these third-party scripts or types of applications that extend the functionality that Figma has to offer. You can use these plugins to customize your experience or create more efficient workflows in Figma. And that goes the same for FigJam too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go home and I'm going to go to the community page. Over here, you can search specifically by the category of plugins, or you can search your community. Now I'm going to just do a text search, and I know what type of plugin I want for imagery. I'm just going to search up Unsplash. Now this is a really great plugin, and I suggest everyone gets it as well. Now here we go. I'm going to go to the Plugins tab up here, and here it is. I'm going to install it. So when you find the plugin that you want, you can either go to the page, or you can go to that list page that we were just on. And once again, you can read all the content here. You can go to the actual website, any comments, version history, all that important information is going to be here. and then you just click that little install button, which I've done. And now it's telling me that, okay, it's installed. Now you may be thinking, well, what do I do now? Well, the good news is you don't have to do much. All you have to do is go back to your file, give it a right click, and then you'll notice I have Unsplash here, and I have a Lorem Ipsum plugin. You may be wondering what that is. So let's use that one first. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to click onto my text file, my text layer, go into my plugins and go to Lorem Ipsum. Now this specific plugin, this is what it looks like. So I don't want to close it after generating the text, and I don't really want to begin with Lorem Ipsum. This is going to give me some placeholder text. So I just want 2 words. Okay, and there's just a title. It allows me to just fill up my card with easy placeholder stuff. So I'm going to use around 3 sentences. That would be way too long. Okay, and I'm just going to resize that to fill the container. And oops, there we go. So I'm just going to close that plugin, and I'm going to go over to here and space that out. That's the line height at 150%. And there we go. Now we have some placeholder text. Now let's use our other plugin. So we don't really have to select anything for our other plugin, just yet at least. We're going to go into our plugins, and I'm going to select Unsplash. Here it is. Perfect. I love this plugin. This is one of my favorite ones. It gives me really great imagery without having to worry too much. So I'm going to go into my search, and I'm just going to find something abstract. Let's see. So it's going to give me a bunch of different options here, and that is when I'm going to select my rectangle. So this is a rectangle layer. You can use a frame layer, but ultimately what we're going to do is when you select this layer and select an image that you like, let's first find something that we like. There are a lot of different options here. I think I'm going to go with, let's go with this. Okay, so I'm going to select it, and what it's going to do is it's going to appear in the fills panel. So it's going to keep the rectangle, but now I can just remove this other fill because I don't need it, and just keep this one here. And there you go. Now I can close this. If I didn't want to put it in here, I can just select that image that I want, and it's just going to appear in my canvas. And then I can do whatever I'd like to it. I could place that inside. Let me close this plugin. I can place it inside my card. So you can do it that way too. It's still an image layer. But yeah, that is how you use the Unsplash plugin and the Lorem Ipsum plugin. Remember, try to use the plugins that are going to work for you. They're going to be really great for making you create some more efficient workflows in Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. I want to get into something else that is really important. Now, if you're going to be working on a design team or working with engineers or developers, working with project managers, you'll often be sharing your prototypes and your designs. Now, you may be wondering, well, how do I share? Well, it's that big blue button right in the right corner. Now, a couple things about this. When I do click this, I have a couple of different options here. Well, several options. You can actually put in their email here. You can enter that email and you can select what type of, permission they have, whether that's editing or viewing. So that's really great if you know their email. Or you can specify that nobody can essentially access this file, even if there is a link. You need to be invited to this file. or you can say anyone with a link can view. Now, when you're on a professional account versus a starter account, you're going to have a couple of little differences here. The starter account's not going to allow you to have that option to allow them to edit just yet. You're going to need to either invite them by email, or once they show up in this list, you can specify their permission. But you can't have another person editing your file. And then all you need to really do, and this is what I often do when I'm interfacing with my design team and I'm telling more junior designers, okay, this is what this needs to look like, or this is what I did, I want some feedback, or I left some feedback on your file, here's a link. So I'll just copy that link and you'll notice that little toast come up and you just paste that link to them. And that's essentially how you share a file. Now, the real great thing is when people are in your file, you'll see their little avatar pop up beside yours. So that's my avatar right now. So you'll see theirs pop up, but they can make comments. And all you need to do to make a comment is to go to the toolbar and click this button, this little icon here, or you can see that little shortcut is C. So I can leave a comment there and say, whoa, cool image. And you can do a couple things when you're making a comment. You can comment directly onto a layer over here or a frame, and these will be attached to that frame. You can comment on a prototype. You can also mention people with using the @ sign. So I just mentioned myself. You can also add emojis. And there's my comment. So I'm just going to press V because that's going to bring me back to my move tool. So I'm going to press V. Now, when you move this, the comment is attached. If the comment were off the frame, it wouldn't attach. Let's go back to our comments. So if I click that comment icon again, this is where I'm going to manage my comments on the right side. I can, sort them and filter them by all comments, mentions, and replies. We also have the ability to hide comments. We also have the ability to sort them here. You can sort them by specific things, pages or threads and whatever is resolved. And I'll get into that in a second. But this is where you're going to see all your comments. You can delete them here. You can copy a link directly to that comment. You can also resolve that comment by clicking this little icon with the checkbox. You can do that here as well. You can dock it to the side, so that way you can move around and it's not over your design. You can copy a link here and delete the thread. You can also just close the comment. But this is how you would resolve a comment. So once it's resolved, it's gone. You can, however, go back into your sort and show the resolved comments. So I have one from even 3 days ago. That's over here, that shows up. So that's basically how you use comments in Figma. And you should get notifications if somebody either mentions you or if there's a comment on your file, and you can adjust those notification preferences as well. But that is how you comment in Figma. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are in our resource right here that is available to you all. And essentially, what we are going to do today is we are going to create an awesome landing page. Now, I have it ready for you all, and it's in that resource, but we're going to do it side by side, piece by piece, together. We're going to learn a bunch of different things. We're going to learn how to use text layers properly within a design. We're going to learn how to use imagery. We're going to create some shapes. We're also going to use things like frames, groups, and constraints. We'll also use auto layout frames for general layout and UI element creation. And what you're going to need is the resource file. You're going to need a couple of different plugins, I'll show those to you right now. You're going to need the Lorem Ipsum plugin, which I will provide for you. So this is what it looks like. I'll provide a link for you. And you will need the Unsplash plugin, which I will provide for you as well. And that is all. So let's jump right in and start creating this landing page. Hey everyone, and welcome back. And now I want to talk about logos. So this is a landing page that I created for a consultancy, pretty quick in terms of, just the execution in general. And the logo is a pretty quick logo as well. So I'm just going to take that logo here. So let's take a look. So how did I create this logo? You'll notice a couple things here. We have a bunch of different items. So we have shapes here. We have triangle shapes, we have a circle, we have a square, and then they're grouped in a group. And you can tell the difference between a group and a frame in two ways. A frame looks like this, traditional frame. That's the layer, what it looks like. And a group looks like this. You can also look up here, whether it's a frame or a group. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'm just going to work just above here, and you can work with me too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my toolbar and select a rectangle. And I'm going to hold down Shift while I create that rectangle. And there we go. I have a square. Now I want that color. You can do a couple things here. You can either select manually through here, or if you see a color on the page, you can just press I and get the color picker. Then I can select whatever color I want. So I'm going to select the red, and I'm just going to leave it like that. The next tool I'm going to grab is the ellipse tool. Instead of going to the toolbar this time, I'm going to press O. And I'm going to hold down Shift 2 to create a perfect circle. And the color picker, I'm going to select I and select a circle. And then I'm going back for the triangle. So the triangle is going to be under the polygon tool. And same thing. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. Now I have my triangle, and I'm going to make it yellow. So I have 3 different shapes here. I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger because it does give you a little bit of extra space here. Now you may be wondering, okay, we have some shapes. Now what do we do? So you can rotate them. This is what I did. I actually rotated them like this. This one, a circle, you don't really need to rotate. And I'm going to rotate like that. And there we go. I'm actually going to just leave them like this. And I'm going to select them all. Then I'm going to go up here into my alignment tools. I'm going to align them together like that. And then I'm going to rename my layers just because I spelled triangle wrong. Circle is the second one. You can see what type of shape they are as well. Here, there we go. And this one is going to be square. I'm going to select them all. And I am going to group them. So that's going to be Control G or Command G, or you can right click and go here into the menu while selecting all of them and select Group Selection. So now I have my group there. So let's take a look. I'm just going to rename it Logo. And there we go. That's all it really takes to create a group and a logo. So you could go ahead and you can do a bunch of different things here. You can either leave it at that, or if you're feeling a bit ambitious, you can try and create something a little bit more original than using basic shapes. Say I wanted to make a circle, and then underneath that circle, I wanted to create another circle. I know I'm moving a little quick here. So you can overlap shapes. You can even select both of them and go into your Boolean operations. And I can say subtract. And now I have a pretty cool shape here. And that is essentially how you can just make some pretty unique shapes by using basic shapes essentially. But I'm going to delete that one for now. So this is our logo. And what I'm going to do is I am going to just create another large frame because we're going to create it side by side. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're just going to put that here just so we know that it is available to us. So we have that landing page ready and we could put it side by side. And now we have our logo asset. So we're just going to move that over here. And there you go. Hey everyone, welcome back. I want to talk about something really cool now, and that is auto layout buttons. So let's jump right in. I'm just going to copy this right here. Let's copy that and just drag it. Same thing here. Okay, so now I have two buttons. These are both auto layout buttons, and we're going to create them together. So a lot of people like to create buttons with rectangles in the back, and I personally don't like that. So you'll see somebody go like, basically they'll grab, you know, just the text layer, and then they'll take a rectangle and do this. And I'm just going to move it to the back here. So that they'll do something like this. And then they'll maybe put in a frame. And then they'll have to deal with constraints and, you know, things not working properly, because then you have like a couple of different things you have to worry about. We'll have to worry about maybe the constraints or the resizing of the actual frame, and also that of the rectangle within. So this is a no-no. Let's avoid that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually keep that text layer, and I'm going to remove the rectangle. I'm going to take this text layer and I'm going to group it again. So remember, if you need the shortcut, just right click and you'll see it over here. So I framed it already using the shortcut. And I'll call this my button. And then I'm going to auto layout. Now, because I'm selecting this button frame right here, I'm going to press I and grab this color. You'll notice that it didn't pop up. That's because it's hidden. So don't be scared if that happens. Here, I can now adjust padding, and I can also set like fixed heights. I like to set fixed heights on my content when it's like a button that's not going to reach like a second line. So I'll just bring that height to 48 pixels, and then I'm going to start building it with auto layout. So we have that selected. The direction doesn't matter here. Neither does the spacing between the items, because we don't have an icon in there, so it's not really going to matter. Here we can actually start to the horizontal spacing, the padding, and I'm just going to select something like 32. And I'm going to make sure that this is aligned in the middle. That's really nice. And I'm not going to worry about the vertical padding because I don't really need it. I set a fixed height on this, as you can see up here, and you don't really need to worry about that. The other thing is the border radius. You can adjust that over here. I'm going to set it to 4. Let's see what that looks like. That looks really nice. So there's a couple things you can do with buttons here. You can either set them to a fixed width, like this. So if you want really long buttons, or you can set it to hug the contents. And hugging the contents means that it's going to essentially be hugging the width of whatever's within, plus the padding. So you'll see the padding's over here is at 32 pixels. Now you may want to make a bunch of different buttons. I like to have a couple different variations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this one by clicking in, pressing Command D. I'm just going to drag it below. And I'm going to make this version. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring down the text to, let's say, 14. I want this to be a transparent button like this. So what I would do here is I would remove the fill and set a stroke. So I'm going to press the little plus button on the stroke. And from here, I can click on this color, click the color picker, and then take that same blue. Same thing for the fill. Now, one thing you may be wondering is, oh my goodness, this is a little bit of a large button. So we can just shrink that down. Say 32, I think is fine. And then we can adjust the padding accordingly. And now we have a primary and a secondary button. And that is how you make some quick buttons using auto layout. Hey everyone, and welcome back. So the next part of this tutorial, we're going to jump right into the navigation. So let's click in here. So I have it set up as a header. That's what I've named it. And you can tell it's an auto layout frame just by its icon. I've actually nested a couple of things within. So I have the navigation, and then I have a horizontal rule. That rule is that long horizontal line that goes across. I'm going to teach you how to build this navigation. So we've already built a couple pieces of it. We've built the secondary button, and we've built the logo. Now let's work on the text. So I'm going to just work just above so you can see them both together. And we're going to group them into a frame. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to just select the text icon with my shortcut. And I am going to start typing some options here. So I have home, and now I'm going to duplicate it about 4 times. Oops. There we go. There we go. And there we go. So I have about. So I'm going to type about. I have our work, services, and careers. Now, when you're working on navigation items, they all have different states. They all just look the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them all and use the color picker. And this is going to change the color for every single one of them. I like this color I used. So I'm going to do that. You can also change the text styles. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to have 2 different states here for now. You'll probably have 3. You'll probably have something like an active state and a hover state and a default state. This looks like a default state, and we should probably have some sort of hover state. I'm not going to really get into that right now. I'm just going to show what the active state is and the default state. And I'm just going to select regular for the default state. And now, because we're going to be on the home page, I'm just going to select this one to be semi-bold. And we're going to steal that color again. I'm going to find it down here in my document colors. And that's essentially how we can start creating our navigation items. I'm going to select them all again, but this time I'm going to rename them all together. I'm going to press Command R, and it will be Control R for Windows users. Over here is where we have the batch renaming modal. And you can either, put their current name in. That's the sign for the current name. Some people like to have them all named the same, and then maybe some sort of variation afterwards that says like V1 or V2 or something like that. It's totally up to you, but I'm going to rename them all to nav item. And the reason I'm doing this is just so I know exactly what they are. And the next thing I'm going to do is, since these are all essentially hugging their content, you can tell that from over here, they're at auto width. I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to group them into a frame. And I'm going to rename that frame by pressing Command R, and I'm going to just call it navigation items. And then I'm turning it into an auto layout frame. Pretty sure you guessed that by now. And you can select the spacing. I'm going to select, I think 32 pixels is fine. You don't really need to select the alignment. They're all essentially the same here, but they're going to be spaced out horizontally in that direction. And I'm not worrying about anything else. I just want this to, be responsive. If I need to add another navigation item or like remove one, it's all going to work together. So now I have my navigation item here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start bringing this into the frame. I'm going to take this button as well because we're going to complete our navigation. And I'm going to take this logo group. Now, I think the logo group is fine. We can either move it or I'm actually going to keep it at that same size. I like having the group here because I can essentially, manipulate it, and the contents within the shapes are going to take that form as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take all of these, select them all while holding Shift, and group them into a frame. And you may be thinking, my goodness, frame after frame after frame, and I promise you it is so worth it because you are going to create some really beautiful designs and you're going to have really clean files looking like this. Now, this is a regular frame. Now we're going to turn it into an auto layout frame again. We're not going to worry too much about the actual width, but I'm going to actually make it span all the way to the edge. Now, I want it so that all the content is spaced across from each other, away from each other, and not packed in. So what that means is I want this on the left side, I want this on the far right side, and I want this content to be centered in the middle. So let's do that. So I'm going to go into my advanced options here. Right now it's set to 64 pixels, and instead of spacing mode at packed, I'm going to select space between. And there we go. The only thing here is now we just need to ensure that the width is fine, the padding around the sides here. So I'm going to select, let's do 30, actually let's do maybe 56 pixels. There we go. So now we have 56 pixels for the spacing. And I think that works perfectly. Now the last part is we need to get a horizontal rule like here. Now to do that, I'm going to go into my shapes, and you can press L as well. Now I have my line tool, and I'm going to hold down Shift while I click and drag, and it's only going to let me go into 45-degree increments in terms of the angle, but I'm going to hold it like this and make it straight. Right now it's black, and we don't want that color. We want something a little bit lighter. Something like that works perfectly well. And I'm going to rename it. And there we go. And I'm sure you've guessed it about now. We are going to group this into a frame again. So I'm just going to use a shortcut here. And there we go. So we have a frame. I'm going to call it header like I did in the previous file or a frame that I'm showing you over here. And I'm going to make that an auto layout frame. And the thing that we need to do here is we need to adjust the spacing. Now I think 24 pixels is sufficient here. That's kind of what it looks like there. Not that we're trying to match it pixel by pixel. And you'll notice one thing. The rule is out of place. It doesn't go all the way. So we're going to have to resize it. And the easiest way to do that and make it responsive is to go up here. So I'm going to fill that container, and now we have it spanning the entire width. So let's take a look here. It's making me select. Okay, so now you'll notice one thing. The line moves, the horizontal rule, but the navigation doesn't. And that's because we need to set it to fill the container. If you select hug contents, it's going to hug the contents, and it's going to be packed instead of actually having the space between. So don't do that. Perfect. Now we've created our navigation. Oops. See, it's trying to make me set the horizontal padding there. The last thing I do is just give it a top padding of 24 pixels. And then I can place it up here. And there we go. We have a pretty cool navigation. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are gonna now work on some of the text elements here. And we're gonna start grouping this with some of our UI elements, like our button. So let's get right into it. Now, the easiest way to do this is to just press the text layer, so T, and then you'll want to define what your heading looks like. So sometimes I'll just write headline or header or title or something like that. And I'll grab, a large font size. Then I'll look for the font I want. In this case, we're using Merriweather. I'm just going to use regular. And I'm going to grab the color by pressing I. There we go. Now, you can use the text I used, or you can go ahead and use one of your plugins, like Lorem Ipsum. I'm going to use Lorem Ipsum for this particular tutorial, but I'm going to select this layer because Lorem Ipsum won't work unless you select a layer. So I'm going to select a layer and I'm going to just write one sentence. And there we go. We have our sentence. Perfect. That's great. So that looks okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this and drag it down. And I'm going to find something more along the lines of some nice subtle body copy. So I am going to grab that color right away. And I definitely urge you all to, experiment a bit, see what you like. Oops, that's Source Sans Pro. I like that one. Like I said, yeah, do you think is, going to be best for your content? Not everything's going to be perfect. Maybe you don't want some body copy here, and I mean, that's totally fine. 18 pixels maybe. Okay, and I think that's fine. And once again, I'm going to grab the plugin, and I want 3 sentences. Great. So I have that. Perfect, and I am just going to increase the line height. Now, this is essentially where we are now. Now, what we're gonna do is, we basically have this, and I'm actually gonna just step away from there for now. So we have some copy here. And you may be wondering, well, I want my copy maybe to be responsive, or I wanna group it so it's easier to move around. And like I said, what I'll usually do here is first I'll just rename this to like title or header or something like that, or headline, and I'll rename this to like body. That way they'll have like a similar type of naming convention. And I'll select both of them, right click, and I'm going to frame that selection. And select auto layout. Here, now I have my frame here, and I am going to go into the spacing and select something reasonable, like 16 pixels. Now this button, let's throw that in here. This is our primary button that we made. Now this is the one problem with auto layout. You're gonna have to nest frames, and I think one of the big reasons is because you don't sometimes want the same spacing between elements like we see here. So I'm going to take my text layers again because I want them to be closer and the button to be more further down. And I'm going to frame them using that shortcut. And you can find that shortcut here. And I'm going to make them an auto layout frame again. And I'm just going to call this copy or text. It really doesn't matter, whatever works for you and whatever is clear. And I'm going to set it to fill the container. And there we go. And I'm going to select all the layers within and set it to fill container as well. And there we go. Now we can go ahead and select a larger spacing between the text content and the button. And that is essentially how we can create our own text layer here. Now we can do a couple things. We can leave it as is, because right now nothing's responsive. So we can go into here and go into our constraints, because it is an auto layout within a regular frame. I hope you all remembered that little distinction about constraints, and set that to left and right. We can also set this to left and right. And now when I select it, everything's a bit responsive. So I'm going to leave it at that. And that's how you create text layers and create responsive layouts within. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to get into some fun stuff over here. We're going to talk about some of these images and shapes, and we're going to get into how to get these images, how to lay them out, working with fills. Let's jump right in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a frame. It doesn't matter. You can use a frame or a rectangle, but I'm just going to create a frame here, and I'm just going to call this large image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my plugins and I'm going to unsplash. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to essentially just grab an image. Maybe whiteboarding is a better image. Oh, there's one of them. So we can actually go here and duplicate this frame and call it small image. We found the exact image here. Actually, that's kind of funny. So we got that image. We have it ready already. So that's great. And I don't know, these people look like they're brainstorming. Maybe we'll find something along the same lines. Okay, I think this one's gonna actually suffice. So I'm gonna close my plugin. So now I have my images, my large and my small image. And what we're gonna do here is we're just gonna actually start working in this area. I'm gonna layer them. Now I didn't do anything super crazy, to be honest. I'm going to just select them together and group them in a frame. So they're grouped in a group right now. I'm just gonna select a frame. And I am just gonna call this imagery. Now, I wouldn't worry about resizing the frame or anything. I'm just trying to get a sense of, how I wanna lay this out. I'm gonna bring that, because I think, I think it can be like a full width almost. And this content over here, we can even apply a stroke to it. So I'm gonna apply a white stroke to give the kind of like cutout effect that I've got going on here. So I'm going to apply a stroke, and then I'm going to create a larger width on that stroke. So I'm going to call it something like 10, maybe 20 is enough. Let's see, even 32. Okay, so 32, that's going to work for us. And you can essentially either specify if you want in the center or outside. We'll just use it on the outside. So now that we have our images, I'm actually just going to place them within our frame over here. So we have our frame with our images. We're not worried about responsiveness just yet. We're just trying to think through, okay, like I like this placement. It looks nice. It looks kind of natural. And I want this to be underneath here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to drag it up. Whoops. We're going to drag the frame up. And right now it is above. So you can do a couple things here. You can either, this is our text layer. So let's just name that quickly. We can either drag this to the very top, or you could do something like this. You can right click on here and send to the back or bring to the front. So a couple different options you have there. So now I have my layer. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to maybe shrink it a bit like that. I'm going to bring this in. I'm going to bring this in as well. Okay, that's good. The problem is this part is not easy to read. So let's make that a little easier. I'm going to remove this layer and I'm going to add a new one. Now it's only going to come in at 20% and I'm going to change that to 100. Don't be scared, it's just black and we're going to change that immediately. So I'm going to select linear because we're going to make a gradient. So we have white and this is the end of the gradient down here. I'm going to make that white as well, but it's at 0%. So that gradient kind of tapers off. See how that works? So we can get a little, we can make it come in from the top there, in the corner, and adjust that nicely. Just so we can make sure that users will be able to read this. And we can even adjust that. And that's how you can make a gradient on top of an image already. You don't need an image to make a gradient. You can use just like a regular shape. And I think that's going to suffice for now for our images. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to be talking about this little section over here. We have some little shapes, actually I would say large shapes, but they do derive from our actual originals here. So I'm going to show you how to make these cool shapes on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take these shapes and duplicate them, or I'm just going to copy them and paste them. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to go into my frame here and Command V. So I have my little shapes here. I'm just moving them down while holding Shift and arrow keys so you can move them. It's faster to hold Shift. So I'm going to select my frame and I'm going to make sure that it's not set to clip content because I want some of these shapes to come outside a little bit. And I'm going to go into here and I am going to ungroup this layer. Hopefully everyone remembered how to ungroup, but if you didn't, don't worry about that. Just right click and the options there with the shortcut once again. So I'm going to ungroup that layer. And we can do a couple things here. You can see on this example, I've rotated them in different ways and I'm using strokes now. Let's get into how to use strokes and create these dotted lines. So I am all over the place with this. Okay, so we have our square. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. And I'm going to make it over this guy's head. And what I'm going to do is I am actually just going to create that stroke right away. Select the color. And there we go. We have a stroke. And I'm going to remove the fill. So the stroke's kind of hard to see. That's fine. I'm going to select 4 pixels as the stroke width. And from here, we can go into our advanced stroke settings. If you wanted, you can have, one stroke at the top or the right, or you can set it to custom, but we're not going to get into that just yet. We're going to go into our advanced stroke settings and we are going to set the style to dash. And there we go. We can specify the amount that we want. Do we want more space between the dash? Do we want less space? I'm going to say we want more space to start. So that is how you create strokes. Let's keep on going. So we have a circle. I'm going to bring the circle down here like it's circled around this little area like a sticky. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go here, go into my strokes, select the color I want, which is blue, remove the fill, select maybe, I don't know, let's say 2. And we are going to go into our advanced settings, set it to dash, and I actually like 4 on this one. I like the little spacing that we get, and it's almost kind of like a dotted line. Okay, you can also set the dash cap to a circular rounded edge. So we'll just do that. I like that look too. And then we're going to be really simple with this one. I'm going to make this one of the largest ones because, and I'm going to tell you this right now, modern design principles still apply to the web. So what I'm saying, and where at least I'm trying to get across here, let's just bring that above, is that we can use certain things like arrows or just the way we outline or place our images to point users' eyes in a certain direction. I want them pointed right towards that button. That's like the main CTA here. So I'm going to set that stroke. Where is that yellow? There we go. Remove the fill. Let's set this to something like 10. We can make that yellow a little bit more darker and easier to see. And there we go. We have some pretty cool shapes over here now. They're all within this frame. They're all contained. And I think that's it for the most part. This is how you use images and shapes within Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. Now we are at the very end of our project, and you probably have something that looks maybe similar to this, or you have some sort of web page that you've put together. Now the one thing that I like to talk about is, now if we take a look at the resource that's given to you, you use your right and left spacing and just resize, you will notice a couple things, like this thing is responsive. Now, how are we going to get that same effect for ours? Let's take a look at what I have so far. So nothing there is responsive. The only thing that is kind of responsive here is the nav. This isn't working the way I want it to. So a couple things. Let's work on these pieces. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put them together and I'm going to group them into a frame. I'm going to rename them and I'm just going to call it hero, kind of like a hero image or something like that. Now I'm going to make sure that it is the full width and the full height, but I'm going to leave this to the right. And I'm going to leave it fixed in terms of its width. Now let's go into our hero frame. This can also stay as an auto layout frame because we have random shapes all over the place. It's a little different when you have things that are overlapping. You can't really do that with auto layout. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Perfect. Let's work on the text first. So I want the text to be off of this page by a wide margin. And I want it to fill the container. So let's go in here. Let's go into our spacing. And on the far left, I'm going to set something like 120 pixels. That way it pushes everything over. I'm going to go into our text and ensure that it is actually set to fill. So what this is going to do is it's going to fill. This is going to be responsive and this is going to remain the same. So when I start to move it like this, let's set, there we go, we got fixed content. Sorry, it got set the constraints on that left and right. So when we start moving this, the hero should respond like that. Now we have some issues here with some spacing. So let's go into our hero container, our frame, and we can set that spacing. So I'm going to take a big chunk, maybe 56. Maybe that's not enough. Let's try that again. How about something like 80 or more? We can even do something like maybe like not 1000, 120. There we go. That seems a bit better. So we have a lot of spacing because we remember that we have this arrow that's hanging out of the frame. Okay, I think that's basically it for the text. And our text is centered. That's because we have the alignment set like this. Let's do some work over here on the images. Now, a couple things. I think it's fine when we're moving like this, but what about when we're doing this? Okay, so the easiest way to do that when we're expanding from top to bottom is to ensure that this frame is going to not only be fixed, but it's actually going to fill that auto layout container. So regular frames can fill auto containers as well. I'm going to leave the horizontal resizing to fixed. Now we're going to have to go inside to this container to play around. So we can start working on, some of the spacing. I'm going to bring this down here like that. And I'm going to make sure that this is set to right and bottom. So that means when I resize it, it's going to come in on the right, but it's also going to, stick to the bottom. So we got to make sure that is set. This one's going to set to fill, and let's go back into that small image. Perfect. The square is fine. We can set that to center because we're not really going to worry too much about how these work too much when they are responsive. Center is fine as long as they kind of have some movement. Same with this. Perfect. Now this larger image, I'm going to have that come down a bit. Like here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure when we scale from top to bottom, this is going to stretch as well. So we know that is working this way. Let's see how this is starting to shape up. Okay, so one thing I noticed is our constraints aren't working properly. That's because we haven't set the constraint for top and bottom here. So let's do that again. Okay, now we got something going here. Now we can fine tune here. This is set to left, that's fine. This one can be set to bottom, so it maybe follows this sticky. This one too. Bring that here over this guy's face. And we'll set this one to bottom. So let's take a look now. Okay. Some more fine tuning we have here. We have the square. So it is set to bottom, left. Oops. Perfect. And for some reason, that one isn't working properly, but that's okay. We're going to bring it down. I think we can settle with something like center. Let's see how this one works now. But that is essentially what you're going to need to do to create a pretty awesome layout. Sometimes things can get a little finicky, like you're witnessing with how this one's working, but that one isn't. But don't let that deter you. I mean, ultimately, look at what we created with just some shapes, some basic images, some text, UI elements. We created a whole responsive layout pretty quickly. And that's how you create a pretty quick landing page in Figma.
What did you think? Was this Figma tutorial great or what? I don't like to brag, but I told you so. Anyways, now that you have the basics of this powerful design tool under your belt, why not keep the momentum going and keep learning? We've just scratched the surface, so here are the 2 paths that you can take to continue your journey. Number 1 is for the people out there that want to level up their Figma skills and learn how to use it for motion design. If that's you, click on this video here to learn everything that's included in Dan's complete motion design with Figma course. Number 2 is for the people out there that want to learn as much as possible about design as a whole, all the way up to getting hired as a professional UX UI designer. And this course includes things like wireframing, sketching, prototyping, and so much more. If that's you, click on this video here to see everything you'll learn in Dan's complete web and mobile design bootcamp course. Now, before you click off this video, please help me show Dan some love by dropping this video a like and letting him know your thoughts in the comments below. It really helps us out and allows us to keep providing more great free content for you guys. But that's it for today, and I look forward to seeing you inside the Zero to Mastery Academy.